Chris Jericho had a very interesting podcast episode on Is Jericho this week. Not the cult one, but that was fun too. But I'm talking about the Wednesday episode of Is Jericho. Jericho was on with a trademark lawyer, talking all about trademarking wrestling names and that kind of shit, you know, gimmick stuff. Check out this clip.
It's strange to me. But like I said, we can talk as much as you want to talk about this. When I came to AEW, and we talked earlier right here on this show that I mentioned, I have owned the name Chris Jericho since late 98. Been using it since my very first match, October 2nd, 1990.
Yep.
Have the program from Ponoka, Alberta to prove it. When I left WWE, you found out that they had trademarked my name in every single country that either I had been or that they run their TV in.
Yeah, so they have, this is it's evil genius is the term I'll use. Evil genius on their part. They make as part of their contracts, okay, Chris, you list out everything that's yours, that you own, the wrestler IP. Then you would have listed in the end,
You're right.
Chris Jericho and any of those things that Jericho and
Is Jericho,
Yeah.
I think the Millennium Man was in there. Some very random was Y2J Bug or some shit like that.
Right. Like, Lion Salt you might have put in there, things like that.
Yeah, right.
And they say, that's great. You own that. But then they put this provision in their agreement. These agreements are 30 pages long, as you know. They're long as hell. And one of the provisions says, you agree that while you are here with us, we have the right to file in our own name for your IP. So they're able to, by contract, because you agreed to let them, and everybody agrees. I'm not saying Chris Jericho screwed up. It's just part of their common contract that says they can file for your IP owned by WWE. So that's while you're under contract.
Right.
So then when you're not under contract, they're not allowed to own it anymore. The problem is most people forget, don't look into it, don't do it, go back and say, well, what did they protect? And so when you and I started working together, I said, well, yeah, you do own Chris Jericho. You're right. So do they.
Yeah, I loved this episode. And this is why I love Is Jericho. I think I mentioned last week how Chris just signed a deal with Sirius. And he's going to be on the Sirius. Is Jericho is going to be on Sirius satellite radio. So to me, that makes me wonder, is it going to be taken off the podcast feed then? Is it going to be exclusive? Are we going to have to pay for it? I'm worried about that because I love this show. Just the fun. He's got such a variety of shit that he puts on the show constantly, from the cult victim on Friday, but that's not wrestling related. So we're not going to cover that kind of stuff here, but the trademark thing, like what a fucking interesting podcast to sit and listen to. And I've always wondered stuff like that and little things too. We got little gems out of this podcast, like the guys that when they get released and they change their name to be just a small variant of what they already are. Like Enzo, for example, they talked about. He changed his name to Enzo. He's basically still Enzo. It's just spelled different. Eugene does that. Instead of being Eugene like he was in the WWE, he's U, the letter U, dash Gene. And shit like that. Like, that's not legal. Like, you can't you can't just change the spelling of it. That has no bearing at all. WWE could still absolutely shut that shit down if they wanted to. And that was fun to know. I didn't know that personally. I thought you could get away with that because that's what guys are doing, right? Even Cesaro filed for what? SCRO? Cesaro? Or SZRO? So we'll basically say Cesaro still, but it won't be spelled the same way or whatever. Things like that, I mean, that's at WWE's discretion. But just an incredible, fascinating interview about how that stuff's done, in how it applies in business and in how it works, like how you can hold a copyright in certain countries or even states. I use it in Texas. I'm a wrestler in Texas, so you can't trademark my name in Texas, but you could trademark it in fucking Louisiana, right? Just randomly. So just so fascinating. And then the little bit of insight into like how WWE's just snaky as fuck, like how the contracts, and I don't know that this in itself is snaky as far as like their contracts ask you to, for the duration of your contract, sign over your trademarks to WWE for business use, not to own forever, but to use so that they can make your t-shirts and that they can make your fucking, get your gimmick out there, you know what I mean? So that part makes sense. But then like they talked about how WWE will like just, oops, I forgot to sign off on those and release those back to you. So they still will technically own it unless you go say something to them, because they're not going to say something to you or proactively sign it back over to you. So little things like that is fun. Or I loved how this guy, like, he kind of sounded like he wasn't trying to take shots at WWE, but he took several. Just talking about how they're kind of a shady company and how he's won some battles over them before. One of them he talked about was for Billy Gunn, actually. Billy Gunn had received a cease and desist, I believe, for using Billy Gunn on TV. But he was able to kind of fight through that, and they were able to slip back, getting him to use the name Billy Gunn on TV. Talked about Cody Rhodes a little bit with the Cody when he was just Cody because he couldn't use Rhodes, and how it's fun because it goes back to who used the trademark first. Even if it wasn't filed, you could argue that there was precedent set first. So like Cody apparently wrestled in college under the name Cody Rhodes. Like he wasn't Cody Runnels even as a collegiate wrestler. Like when he went and did the finals or whatever, he wrestled under Cody Rhodes. And because he did that, there was legal precedent for him calling himself Cody Rhodes before he ever went to the WWE and shit like that. I mean, it's, to me, some of you might not give a fuck, you know, give me my wrestling. I want to just hear about wrestling shit. But to me, this was endlessly fascinating. I could have heard another hour of this stuff easily. But I get into all that random. I like those fun little sidebar things. You know, I like learning about the legalities of professional wrestling. And it's great to know. It's good shit to know as far as trademark law and copyright and all that stuff. So good to know, good to hear, fascinating. Go out of your way to listen to that. If any of this piques your interest at all and you're like curious about it, highly recommend, because nothing I say here is going to do that conversation justice. I can give you a little clippets and thoughts on those clippets and that sort of thing, but really just listen to that trademark lawyer talk and how he explains the processes and how he's gone to bat with WWE a few times and works for a lot of the AEW talent now, getting them all trademarked up and stuff. So great shit. As always, Talk is Jericho. Go check that shit out.
Let me tell you something, brother. You can check out full episodes each and every Sunday right here on this channel, dude. Don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe, and don't forget to take your vitamins and say your prayers, brother.